Hello, everyone, and welcome to the PMO Virtual Summit. It's so great to have you here. Today, we have a very special guest, Bill Dow, who's going to be speaking to us about running a PMO. That's what it's all about, right? Once you have the PMO set up, once you get that job, once you get the PMO set up, it's all about running it. It's a meticulous process, but Bill's got it laid out for us. So, Bill, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. I appreciate being here.
Absolutely. So let me go ahead and tell you guys a bit about Bill, and I'm going to hand it over to Bill to take us through his presentation. Bill Dow, PMP, is a recognized expert in project management by the Project Management Institute, or PMI, for specifically developing and managing project management offices, or PMOs. His extensive experience with project management and PMOs have enabled him to co-author several comprehensive books available through Amazon.com. Bill has presented and ran several workshops on PMO and project management conferences around the world, including the UK, Canada, and the United States. Bill has taught at the college level for more than 25 years in the Washington State, British Columbia, and Ontario, Canada, and has worked at Microsoft for more than 13 years. He has spoken at multiple Project Management Institute or PMI conferences, breakfasts, and events nationally. ProjectManagement.com and ProjectTimes.com host numerous articles by Bill currently. That's Bill for you. Bill, great to have you here. Take us away.
Thank you very much. So welcome, everyone. Welcome to the PMO Lifecycle, how to run a PMO. So we're going to walk you through the steps. We got a great agenda. So we just did a little introduction there. So I'm going to walk you through the 4 big steps of running a PMO. We'll talk about executive reports. We'll talk about specific PMO reports. We'll go into day-to-day operations, and then we'll go into PMO mentoring and buddy systems, and then we'll do a quick wrap-up. So let's start with running a PMO, right? So when we think about running a PMO these days, much more complicated, much more difficult, right? But what I've done is I've broken it down to 4 easy kind of consumable bite-sized chunks that you can tackle when you're running your PMO. And here they are. There's developing executive reports, developing PMO-specific reports, and we'll go into that, your PMO day-to-day operations, and then finally, your PMO mentoring and buddy systems. So that's it, 4 easy steps, right? Pretty easy. Well, not really, actually. There's a lot of complexity to those steps, and so we're going to walk you through those complexities. But breaking it down like this with the 4 steps should make it easy for you to consume and really walk through the process. So let's start with executive reports. So when we think about executive reports, this is really a wild card, right? Many executives are going to require different types of reports. Every executive is different. Every report request you're going to get is different. But a proactive PMO manager is really about setting up and establishing a good set of reports for their executives. So one of the key components of running a successful PMO is keeping your executives happy. And partially by keeping them happy is by giving them a good set of reports. And that could be scorecards, that could be milestone calendars, that could be dashboards, right? But it's all about getting the executives the reports they need to be able to answer the business questions that they need to drive their business forward. So one of the first reports, and the one that I strongly recommend you set up, is your PMO dashboard. So let's spend a minute with this one. You've got your ID, you've got your name, your health, your schedule, your scope, cost, quality, adoption, you've got some notes. So you've really got some critical components of a project that most executives are going to want to know about, right? You've got your colors, so it's very easy to consume. But you'll also notice that we've got the text in the colors. And do you know why we do that? Well, we do that for the colorblind executives. Right? A lot of executives are actually colorblind, and they may or may not mention that to you. So one of the tricks is you just directly put that text in. And so very easy to consume, very easy to get set up. Get your program and project managers updating this on a weekly basis. Get this in front of your executives. And really that would be a great starting point to get started in executive reporting and really pushing that, that information out to them on a weekly basis. But you can do resource reports, you can do milestone reports, you can do dashboards, right? Regardless of what reports you set up, the really interesting thing is there will always, 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 always be another report needed. And so that's a good thing, right? If your executives are asking you for reports and they're asking you for more information, that means they care, that means they're engaged. And so you're going to want to get a good set of reports set up and then continuing monitoring and working with your executives, again, to get the executives the information they need to be able to help drive the business and grow the business going forward. However, some of those reports that you get set up won't be at the right level, right? And so you as a PMO manager, you're going to need some specific reports just for your PMO, right? And so what will that be? Well, it's going to be a combination of both high-level executive type of reports and some detailed tactical reports to help you drive your PMO on a day-to-day basis. So once you get those specific reports set up and the executives, they're happy, they're good, right? That's great. Then what you want to do is get those specific reports that may be a little too detailed or not at the right level for the executives, so you don't want to hand those to them, but you're going to want them to run for your particular role in your particular environment. Again, you're going to be handling the tactical of the PMO. Your executives are going to want that business and that overview, and so it just may not be the right level for you to send those over. So first thing, though, I highly recommend is you watch and track what you're giving your executives. So you want to stay on top of that, right? So you're providing dashboards or milestone reports or resource reports, whatever they are. If the executives are getting them, you're getting them, and you're ensuring the quality is there. So start with that. Then what you're going to do when we talk about specific reports, one of the things I think is critical to set up is a dependency tracker, right? So you've got multiple dependencies that are going on your PMO. You've got your project 1, your project 2. What's the dependency type? Is it code? Is it schedule? Who's responsible for it? What's the status of it? So again, a dependency report is really a critical report that you're going to want to get set up. It's not going to be something that your executives are going to be interested in, but it's going to be something that you're going to help move the PMO forward and help your program and project managers execute projects. So that's one report I strongly suggest you set up. Again, specific to you, not necessarily executives. The next report is your PMO resource report. And again, this is another report, especially if you've got a lot of vendors, right? When are people rolling on? When are they rolling off? What are some of the vacations, right? Roger's is rolling off in the last 2 weeks of August, Bill's off on this vacation, whatever the case may be, but it's all about your resources and the hours of spending and when they're coming and going. So it's great to have that resource view. Your executives may like that, some will, some won't. You know, I put that as an example for executives because some will want that information. But again, I really feel like it's a good report for you running your PMO as well. Again, specific organizations and PMO managers are going to demand their own set of reports. You're going to want your set of reports, right? And there's obviously, we could be here all day. There's too many to list out. But one of the things that PMO managers I find miss is all the software that they have. So for example, Project Online or Oracle, whatever portfolio management software you have, there's also a valuable set of resources or reports within that software as well, right? So if you got Project Online, there's a ton of different reports you can do with Power BI and all the goodness there. Well, those are going to be reports that you're going to want to generate and keep and really push out for your PMO as well. When you look at reports, though, there's really 4 big buckets, right? There's portfolio management, there's program management, project management, and agile. And when you look at those 4 buckets, you're going to break them down in really these big categories. So if you look at portfolio, you'll go past reports, current reports, and future reports. Same thing for program things, same thing for projects. So if you've got a typical PMO that's got portfolio managers, program managers, and project managers, you're going to have these types of reports, and you're going to want to establish these type of reports. Obviously, all of this will head towards dashboards. It's not something I recommend you setting up immediately, but it's something long-term that you're going to want to go to. Something like a Power BI, it's got an amazing ability to get some great data out there. But again, crawl, walk, run with this. Make sure you're getting that set up, getting these reports set up in these 3 buckets, and then automate that, and then start to move towards the dashboard view. When you think about past reports, though, what are some past reports? Well, they're roadmaps, right? They're planning reports. They're performance reports. Current reports would be a status report or a budget report or a schedule report. And then future reports could be earned value reports or roadmaps or performance reports. So each of these reports are then broken down and make sense for that respective area, right? What's our portfolio project? What's our roadmap? What's the performance of those? So each of those have that breakdown. And again, I'd get to those dashboards sooner than later, but get the processes established and set up first, and then move on to dashboards. One of the key things when you think about reports, though, is don't get tied down in creating massive amount of reports, right? And you can just completely do report after report after report. And again, some of it will just be overwhelming, and there's so many ideas of different reports. You don't want to do that. You want to get the right set and the right balance. Also be aware, though, that some of your executives won't want that day-to-day, but you will need that. You won't be able to run your PMO with just the high-level executive information. You're going to want to actually get some day-to-day reports or the detailed reports set up, and make sure you get those set up as well. Packages, right? They come with a ton of reports that can be utilized. Don't forget those reports. Don't ignore those reports. But just remember, there's processes and stuff tied to that you want to make sure that you've got it in place. That's why I say get it done manually first and then move forward. So love the reports. There's some great tools out there. I think it's a critical part of running a PMO from both the executive and the detailed side. Just get them set up, but just don't spend all your time building them. Okay, one of the key components of running a PMO from a day-to-day operations perspective is really, what do you do? Like, what do you do on a day-to-day basis? And a ton of PMO managers, believe it or not, get stuck with this. They just don't know what to do. So what I've done is I've kind of broken it down and said, what can you do? So many PMO managers struggle with this, right? What do you do on a day-to-day basis? What reports do I run? How involved do I get with projects? I don't know where to start, right? That list goes on and on and on, and it can be challenging because often PMO managers are often project managers that get promoted into that role. And so it's a very different role running a PMO than doing a tactical project. So again, they do struggle, and they come by it honestly because a lot of times they just don't know what to do. And again, I think I've broken that down to really help you walk through that process. So I think one of the key components of a PMO manager is to get set up, and one of the first things that they can do is set up a PMO cadence calendar. So what do I mean by that? Well, this is the cadence, or this is how your PMO is going to operate. You cover all the PMO meetings, all the key things that happens in your PMO, and your PMO members, your team members, will schedule around these. That means these are mandatory meetings, and because when you're running a PMO, you've got multiple project managers or program managers, you don't get a lot of opportunity to bring everyone together. So when you establish this cadence calendar, you establish the things you want to run for your PMO, you want your PMO members to be there, and you want to make sure that you've got a spot where you can talk to them all and help drive your organization forward. So here's an example, very simple, very basic, right? On Tuesdays, have a review meeting, LT meeting on Thursdays, submit status reports. It's very simple. It's a very effective tool. But as a PMO manager, one of the first things that you can get set up is, how am I going to operate my organization? Get it up on a SharePoint, get it up on a calendar tool, wherever the case may be, but you have a PMO cadence calendar set up, and you're driving to that cadence. And your team members are driving to that cadence as well, and they schedule all around this because these are the things you want to make sure you're setting up and they're doing as you go through the weeks. Now, for a directive PMO, for example, this is a must-have, right? And so you're saying, hey, you guys got to attend these, you got to submit the status reports, and so the cadence calendar works very, very well in a directive PMO. So once you get that set up, right, you have a calendar set up, then what I do is I start getting the major programs and projects, right? So what are the key components that you're gonna want to track, and get those documented on that cadence calendar as well. Right, so once everything's on there, you can start looking at reporting and when that happens. But again, what will that look like? Well, here's that cadence calendar, but we're adding our major programs and projects, right? There's the Bluetooth meeting, there's the marketing status meeting, whatever the meetings are, the Atlas meeting, doesn't matter. But you're starting to kind of build, hey, here's the cadence of how I run my PMO, and here are the critical programs and projects and how they kind of intermix. Now, it does get complicated. I get that. If you're running 300, 400, 500 projects, I've run some PMOs that have a massive amount of projects, you clearly can't get them all on the calendar. But you can get the top 5, you can get the top 10, you can get the top ones on there to give you that visibility of exactly when the big programs and projects are running and what their cadence is, as well as how it intermixes and how it works with your cadence as well. So really critical to get those two set up and running. Now, what about Agile, right? So a lot of us are running Agile PMOs. Well, we also got to get the Agile meetings on there, right? Our sprint planning meetings, our daily stand-ups, our sprint reviews, right? We get all of our key Agile meetings on that cadence calendar as well, and really helps you drive the rhythm of Agile. And so they've got some great meetings that you want to get set up, but get those on the cadence calendar as well is really important. Okay, so that's, you don't want to miss your Agile. And then finally, and I've been doing this probably 15, 20 years or so now, but it's really a vacation calendar. You wouldn't believe how valuable this is to have a calendar to be able to look and say, Bob's out of office, Mary's out of office, Bill's out of office, whatever the case may be, get it up on SharePoint, get it on a shared calendar, but just get your resources in your PMO, get them getting on the calendar, getting their details on the calendar, so you know exactly where everyone is. Really, really an easy, simple calendar to set up, but something very, very valuable, and I strongly suggest you set that up as well. Okay? All right, so now we've got our calendar set up, and we've got some components of our PMO set up, right? We've got some reports set up, we've got our calendar set up, and so now we can get into the details. Now we can say, well, what do I actually do, and how do I run this PMO on a day-to-day basis? Well, I think there's really 10, right? 10 major areas to running a PMO. You're going to define your color definitions. You're going to set up your CR process. You're going to develop your portfolio program and project playbooks. You're going to develop, you define a priority list. You define your PMO weekly checklist. You're going to set up your transition plans, develop your templates, execute on your reports, select your PMO tools, and number 10, and it's critical, is you continue to talk to management about the value of your PMO. Right? What value is your PMO bringing? And as a PMO manager for many, many years, this is a constant conversation that you will continually have. Wow, that's a huge list, right? There's 10 things that you need to get set up and running to run a successful PMO. That's huge. That's a massive amount of work. Now, what's one thing I didn't mention? The execution of programs and projects, right? And so the helping out of programs and projects, the getting involved in meetings and helping mentor your program and project managers, right? I didn't even mention that because that's just also a major part of your role. So if you've got portfolio, program, and project managers, you're going to have 3 sets of conversations, 3 different roles. You're going to have to work those as well. Okay, so I didn't mention that because that's just part of the DNA of running a PMO. And the last thing, number 11, because I really said there's top 10, but there's just one more that you have to also cover, and it's your hiring, your finding, your vendors, your POs, right? It's your ongoing HR items. Right, so what are all the things that you're going to do from an HR? If you've got vendors, you're going to be hiring and firing vendors. You're going to be working POs, working statement of works. That's also a major part of your role as well. So Running a PMO really consists of those top 11 items, not 10. Okay? So every PMO is going to require some key components. I just gave you 10 of them. They range from color definitions to CR processes to playbooks, right? And regardless of what it is, you're going to need these things set up, right? And I'll walk you through why, but you're going to need these things set up to run a successful PMO, because without it, you're going to struggle, right? If you don't have that DNA or that foundation set up, when those things come up, right, such as color definitions, and let's jump into step one, color definitions. If you don't have that standard color definition, you're going to really have a huge problem. So every PMO is going to require a color definition, right? What does red mean? What does yellow? What does green mean? If you don't define that, then every project manager will have their flavor of red, their flavor of yellow, and their flavor of green. That's not good. That's not scalable. That's not something I recommend. And so you could have something very, very simple. Red, project's in trouble. Yellow, project's not on track. Green, everything's fine. You could have those basic definitions, and regardless of what those definitions are, these are just basic ones, regardless of they are, you just have to have that consistent definition, right? And without that, every project manager is going to have their own version of red. And that's a huge problem if one project manager or multiple project managers are dealing with one customer. Well, this guy, and this is my version of red, this is my version of red. That's not a good thing. It's one of the top things I think every PMO manager has to establish. A CR process, right? Again, every PMO must have some sort of change request process. A change request process, right? Once you were baseline. Once we said, okay, we're good to go, and now we can start approving and proceeding with the project, we have to have the ability to control changes. Without it, project managers won't know how to handle changes, right? They just won't know what to do. And we've seen that before. We've seen project managers go, there's no CR process, and this customer is asking for a change, this customer is asking for a change, what do I do, what do I do? I'll just make the team do it. That's a huge problem. It doesn't have to be complex. It can be very, very simple, but you have to have a CR process for running a project and then rolling that up and running a PMO. So you set it up for your PMO, and then you obviously implement it at the program and project level. Okay? The next set, and I've done these for years as well, and I really love these, are really around playbooks. And so what are playbooks, right? Well, really, if you're going to have multiple roles in your PMO, such as portfolio manager or project manager, then you're going to have a playbook or an operating manual of what you want them to do. What does your portfolio manager do? What does your program manager do? What does your project manager do, right? So these playbooks are really operating models, operating manuals, and they're the things that you set up to allow them to know exactly what they're doing in their role. It sets a foundation of saying, hey, I expect you to do this and you to do this, right? And so it's really important to set up. I've set them up for years, really, really like them because it gives you that expectations, and it sets expectations for your resources as well of what you expect of them. So what do they look like? What are some of the examples? Well, here's a portfolio playbook, right? And again, these are for you to define, but here are some of the big things for a portfolio manager. Scope, right? Portfolio charters, portfolio metrics, roles and responsibilities. What's your work breakdown structure, right? What's your kickoff meeting? All of these documents all of these tasks will be put into one big document, and this is your playbook. And so you as a PMO manager, you need to write these playbooks and say, here's what I expect my portfolio manager to do. And of course, the things you're seeing here are all portfolio manager related, right? And then of course you have a program manager playbook, your charter, your oversight table, your benefits, right? Your org structure, status report. Again, what do you expect a program manager to do? Be very different from a portfolio, very different from a program, and then of course a project manager. And again, you're going to see all the typical things: a charter, a kickoff, a budget, lessons learned, roles and responsibilities. Again, what do you expect a project manager to do? Now, these are often fairly lengthy books, right? These are fairly detailed information about what you expect each of these roles to do. So when you have a new portfolio manager come on board, these become great onboarding documents because of that expectation, right? Here's the role, here's what we expect you to do. Go read this document and really drive through this because this is my expectations of you. Same with program, same with project, right? So they become great onboarding documents, but they're fairly lengthy documents, and we're not expecting that these various roles are looking into these and basically spending all their time reading these documents and living by them. What we're expecting them are, they're really the guidelines, right? They're guidelines of how these roles work in your organization. Again, for a directive PMO, very, very important. And then, of course, Agile, right? Because Agile's still so new and people are getting excited about Agile and all the goodness it brings. What is Agile? Roles and responsibilities, ceremonies, reporting, right? Agile tools. Again, all great, great views of exactly what you expect people to do in that Agile space. And again, you lay it all out in your playbook. So I strongly suggest you set up playbooks. They've been very, very successful for me in the past. People like them, people expect them, and it's something that I think from an onboarding perspective and an expectations perspective, they are critical for running a successful PMO. The next is, step 4 is really about the priority list. And you'd be surprised how many PMOs don't have a basic priority list, okay? And so establishing a project priority list for your programs and projects is really a critical component of running a PMO, right? PMO team members will use this priority list as a trade-off matrix, right? If this one's more important than this one, then they'll start working on the higher priorities first, and then, of course, work on the lower ones. Because without a priority list, they're not going to know what to do. They're not going to know what's more important, and they're not going to know necessarily where to focus their time. And you'd be surprised when I talk to other PMO managers, they don't actually have priority lists. The people just know what to work on. And that's a huge problem. So here it is. It doesn't have to be complex. It doesn't, very basic. You got the ID, the name, the priority, the status, and the go live. Very simple, very easy to consume, but that's that one list that people can go to and say, hey, I know exactly what the priority is. Get your executives to buy off on it, get your executives to approve it, get it in a centralized SharePoint site or a place that people can get to. But again, it's really, really important that you drive and get that one list that everyone can see. And so I actually had a scenario once where I took over a PMO, we didn't have a priority list. I had one of the managers come up to me and says, my team doesn't know what to work on. And I said, you're kidding, right? And they said, no, my team doesn't know what to work on. And I said, oh, okay. So we quickly whipped off a priority list. We got it in front of executives. We put it up on the SharePoint site, and magically the team knew what to work on. So it really does happen. It really is a scenario where if you don't have a priority list, you've got some scenarios where people will stop working or just refuse to go, I don't know what to work on. So I've seen it happen, and it's not pretty, but it happens. So the next step in the process, step 5, is your weekly checklist, right? So what do you expect the individual roles to do? Again, from a directive PMO, very, very good, but this works in a lot of cases as well. But what is your weekly checklist? So it's probably a follow-up from the playbook. So when I talked about the playbooks, they're those 50, 60, 70-page documents, right? Massive documents are great for onboarding. They're great for setting the expectations. Absolutely love them. But you're not going to want your program and project managers to be doing every detail of the playbook every week. It's not possible. But you are going to want some things. You're going to want a weekly status report. You're going to want a schedule. You're going to want risk and issues updated weekly. There are some things that you will pull from that playbook, and you'll set that expectations. Hey, send me a status report, send me a schedule, update your schedule, that type of thing. And again, it's a balance of what you want to put on that list. There's no right or wrong number of things, but you're going to grab them from the playbooks and you're going to put them into a weekly checklist. Again, it's all about running that cadence and running that scalable PMO, so you know what people are doing, you know what people are driving, and you know that every week you can get a status report. Every week their schedule's up to date, right? That's how you run that scalable operation, and this weekly checklist is a critical part of that. And that's the expectations at the much smaller level. But the PMs and program managers, they like that. They go, yeah, okay, I know I have to get a status report in. I know at 4 o'clock I need to get my schedule updated. So a weekly checklist is another component of running a PMO and setting expectations for your members. The next step in that process is your transition plan. And so what is that, right? So this is really a document that allows one project manager to take over from another project manager. So step 6 is really getting that transition plan in place for every employee or every vendor in your PMO. Even if they're not leaving, which you don't ever really know, get a transition plan set up, get it updated. But when you have a person leaving, the transition from one project manager to another is much easier if it's documented and in place. And so really, really important to get that set up. Okay? The next step in the process is your PMO templates and reports, so step 7. And so let's start with templates, and then we'll jump quickly into reports. But when you talk about templates, you're talking about establishing a branding for your organization. Right? So templates would be kickoff decks, no-go decks, go-live decks, emails, sprint retrospectives, sprint reviews, right? But it's about establishing a set of standard templates that you want all your PMs to be using on your project, right? You don't want one PM to have one color deck and working with one customer, and then another PM have a different customer colored deck and different branding and different styles and working with that same customer, because the customer doesn't get the same experience. And you as a PMO manager, you want to have a branding. You want to have a color scheme. You want to have that same look and feel for all your emails, for all your go live decks, right? So it's about establishing that branding and really and rolling that branding out through all the materials that your organization is creating. So it's really important to have that same look and feel and really have every PM using that same look and feel on your projects. So I love that, have had that set up for a long time now, use various color schemes, and it really doesn't matter what they are. It's about that consistency and that same experience across your customer base. We talked about reports again. This is, again, when you're talking about running the reports, this is about getting those things out there in the past, current, and future. And then the next step is your tools, right? And so step 9 is your PMO tools and processes. And so it's all about understanding what tools are you going to run in running your PMO. And so when we talk about building a PMO, it's about looking at the tools. Well, this is where you start piloting. All right, you start piloting across portfolio management, program and project, agile, right? Hundreds and hundreds of tools out there, hundreds of tools available. But this is where you actually start bringing the tools in and start piloting them and understanding what works and what doesn't work, right? Across portfolio management, across program and project. Some of the tips and best practices: don't buy every tool out there. Right? There's a lot of tool salesmen, but don't buy every tool out there. Make sure you've got a lot of manual processes in place and those manual processes are working, and then make sure you can get a tool that can automate that manual process. Right? And so again, really, really important to also understand how mature your PMO is and the processes required to use these tools. And again, if you bring in tools too early and you don't have that maturity level, that's a huge problem as well. So really kind of watch that. I've done that before. I brought in some tools that were too mature for my organization. And so, and it was a failure, right? If we brought this stuff in, we thought it would work, and it didn't work. And it was like, hey, shame on me. You have to get the processes and maturities in place and the people excited about the tools before you can just bring in tools and go and implement these tools. It's all about getting the process and the maturity in place. But in running a PMO, it's the piloting and trying some of these out. And a lot of the big players, tool players, will let you try some of the stuff out so you can see what works and doesn't work. Okay, and then when you talk about the process side of things, there's really 4 major processes that you're going to set up, right? You've got your generic PMO processes, which is like governance and escalation and financial, right? Your portfolio management processes, right? Initiation, planning, status, program status, right? Project management processes. And again, these all vary based on what you have in your organization, right? If you have all three of those, portfolio, program, project, you'd set up processes. You're going to want that generic PMO process. That's just something you're going to want get set up. Now, remember, every one of the software tools also will come with processes. So there's a layer of software tools, processes that you'd put on top of this as well. So again, that's a really key component that you can't forget about, and you have to kind of keep tracking as well. You'll have your 4 processes, but remember the software process as well. And then Agile, right? Agile's got its own series of processes. Product backlog, sprint backlog, grooming, Agile tool processes, team meetings, right? And so again, because Agile's so hot and Agile's really kind of taken over, you're going to want to go, what are my Agile processes as well? So you'll have Agile processes, you'll have project management, portfolio program and project processes, you'll have generic processes, and you'll have tool processes across both. So running a PMO is about establishing a number of processes, and those are really the 4 big buckets, 4 or 5 big buckets that I strongly suggest you set up and really think about driving for your organization. Okay, and then we talk about that continued management support, right? And that continued conversation. If you run a PMO for a while, you're going to see, hey, your executives will say, what's your value? What are you providing? Why do we need this? What happens if we shut it down? What would be the impact of that, right? These are ongoing elevator speeches. These are ongoing conversations that your leadership will continue to have with you. And as a PMO manager, you need to stay on top of that. Right? As a PMO manager, you have to have that elevator speech. You have to have that knowledge of the value you're providing. And if you're providing a lot of great business value and you're tied to the hip with your business, it becomes a much easier conversation, especially if you get business leaders that are working with you and saying, hey, I'm getting all this great reports. I can see all this visibility. These projects here are moving my business dial, right? And so this value conversation is one that you will continue to have. And it's something when you're running your PMO, is something that you really have to have down and down solid. Now, I don't bring this up when I say you're building your PMO, because the value conversation, if you're in a scenario where your executives say come off and build your PMO, then there's not much of that value conversation that has to happen when you've already got the approval to build it, because someone has said, hey, okay, go ahead and do it. I'm saying it really comes in deep and comes up over and over and over when you're running a PMO and you've been running a PMO for a while. So something I've experienced for years and something you will as well, but just make sure you have that nailed down. And then the step 11, right? We kind of threw in that 11th step, but it's around the HR side of things, right? And this is so critical. You're going to be hiring and firing both employees and vendors, right? You got vendor management, you got PO management, you got mentoring, right? So all these HR items are all a critical part of your PMO and something that you'll establish and continue to establish and drive going forward. So just remember those HR items, because it's a big component of that. So to summarize the day-to-day, right, we defined our colors, we set up our CR process, we've executed the reports, right, check, 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 check. We've really kind of got the main components of running a PMO up and running and established, and now it's a matter of continue to refine them and continue to better your PMO on a day-to-day basis. And of course, that 11th step is just something that's part of the DNA of every hiring manager and every manager around the POs, hiring the vendors, the contractors. All that's a major component for most PMOs, so you don't want to forget that 11th step as well. Right? So as we summarize, we've covered the top 11 steps in running a PMO from a day-to-day perspective. They really are critical. They really are important to get driving out across every industry, right? So research and construction and manufacturing, all are going to require colors. All are going to require transition plans, right? So this is not just an IT thing. Really look and scale this across each industry, because it's really a key component of getting set up for every organization. So take the time, build these areas out, and refine them, and continue to refine them as you go forward. Okay, so let's look at PMO Resources, which is really that fourth step in that process. So remember I said there's 4 easy steps. Well, this is the 4th step, and it's around mentoring and buddy systems. Now, this is probably one of the most successful things I've ever set up and most proud of for my in my PMO management career, and it's the PMO buddy system. But let me walk you through both of them. So I think it's really, really important to set up either a mentoring program or a buddy system, right? Your mentoring program is often very formal, tied to HR, tied to performance reviews. Most companies have them, but they're this formal structure process, which are just unbelievable. I think they're wonderful. And I think if you have them, jump on that, get it part of your PMO. I think it's great. Your PMO buddy system is a little less formal, right? And so in those, right, they often become much more successful because there's not a lot of rigor to them, right? They're driven a lot by the individuals that are part of the buddy system. I've been running these buddy systems for years. I'm very, very happy with them, very successful. People actually love being involved in them. But let's look at them. So when you think about the mentoring program, right? Most companies offer them, right? And they pair employees with like careers, right? So I think your PMO should have a mentoring program, or you should jump onto what HR is already doing, but just get a mentoring program in place. If you've got a big structured PMO and you really want to have that formality, but it is formal in nature, right? And so some employees maybe wanting to be part of this, maybe not wanting to be part of it, but they generally go for a year. They're kind of structured. They're kind of rigorous. There's a mentor and a mentee scenario set up there. But I do believe they're important. They're open to all roles, right? You should have them. I think they're great. And it's just something that I strongly suggest you set up. Or you can set up this buddy system, right? And this tends to have fewer restrictions, much less formal. And what you're doing here is you're pairing like roles, right? And so they're a mentor-mentor relationship where no one person takes the lead. And so that's a huge difference between a mentoring system, right? Where I've got a mentor and a mentee, and the mentee is looking to that mentor for career advice and all that goodness, right? Well, a buddy system is really the 2 liked roles where they bounce ideas off, they act as sounding boards, they back each other up, they maybe attend each other's status meetings when they're on vacation, right? This is really that kind of that buddy where you pair them up. And so I really like this one, and people involved in this one like this one a little bit more as well. So the guidelines, right, they should commit to each other for a certain amount of time. I'd say a minimum of 3 months. They share ideas, share suggestions, best practices. They commit to 1 or 2 buddy meetings a month, right? But it's up to them, right? And they also commit to being open and honest with each other. And to you, the management, right? So if you pair people up and you buddy them up and it just doesn't work, you expect either or of them to come to you and say, you know what, I just don't think this relationship's working. I'm not getting what I need. And so you can repair them, right? But the key thing here is no employee buddy is obligated to take on the leadership role, right? So this is not a mentoring program. This is a buddy system, so there's no one leader or one person looking to the other from that mentor-mentee relationship. And this is why this works so well, right? This is why this buddy system works so well, because they're in it together, and it's really been successful. I really strongly suggest you set that up as well. Either or, but it's up to you. So as we summarize, we covered the key steps to running successful PMO, right? I believe each of these steps are critical. I've set them up for years, and it really helps you run a PMO at the highest level, right? So follow these steps for your best chance of success. So here's my information, Build Out PMP, buildout.publishingllc.com. My books are up on Amazon. Get me on LinkedIn as well. And so I want to thank you for your time and thank you for attending.
That was awesome. Thank you so much, Bill.
No problem. So I'll go back one here. Yeah.
Yep.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. That was amazing.
Thanks. So I'll just take it out of mode here. Okay. Yeah.
All right, that's perfect. All right, so Bill, obviously, there are motivational speeches, there are things about the what and the why.
Mm-hmm.
Here we got really into the meat of things, from bang, 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 right into it. It was just
Yeah.
flow and right into it. And that was just so much, so amazing. So many takeaways for our audience. And I'm
Awesome.
really appreciative of that. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Obviously, a lot of questions, but we do have limited time, so I'm going to limit to a few questions here.
Okay. Sure.
So I'm gonna go ahead and ask you right away.
Sure.
The first question that I have, Bill, is, this was like 11 steps, right?
Yeah.
Again, it's easier for people to, it's easy for people to write them down, put them on a checklist.
Sure.
But some people, depending on their situation, may have a lot of things going on, and it may be overwhelming just to start off
Sure.
with, right?
Yeah.
So if you were to sort of say, out of these 11, which were the top 3 things that a PMO leader would need to focus on when running a PMO? So the PMO set up, but now they're running it.
Yeah.
What would those 3 things be?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. You're right. 11 things is a lot to consume, right? But again, you're not right. You're basically not doing these things in one day. You're doing through the course of your job, right? So you got a little bit of time. But I would say color definitions. I have struggled with that for many, many years until you define your colors. What does red mean? What does yellow mean? What does green mean? That is so simple. But every PM out there has got their own version. Color definitions, number 1. A priority list, number 2. I literally had someone come to my office and say, my team is not working on anything because we don't know what to work on. So you got to have a priority list. Get a priority list, number 2. Number 3, a weekly PMO checklist. I love the playbooks. The playbooks are absolutely everything to me. I've been very, very successful with them, but they're 60 pages, they're 70 pages. A weekly checklist is really, hey, I want a status report. I want a schedule. I want to know that you guys are executing your projects. So you just take the key components out of those playbooks. But those are the 3 top things: color definition, priority, weekly checklist.
Awesome. Thanks, Bill. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Bill, you also talk about, the $1 million value question.
Yeah.
Right. Why a PMO is still valuable to a company, right? And it's so critical. What can PMO leaders do to proactively answer that question, right? So not wait for someone to come up and say, hey, Bill, is your PMO still valuable, right?
Yep.
What can people say? What can PMO leaders do so they never get asked that question because they keep on answering that proactively?
Yep. So that's my step 10, right? That is that elevator speech. That is that working with your business leaders to say, hey, are we providing the value, right? So that is your proactive job that you need to go do. You need to get out there and you need to work with your business leaders. You need to work with your LT and you need to be out there. And a lot of that comes with reporting, right? And the visibility. So a lot about getting dashboards out there. But also, if you can deliver, if your programs and projects are truly adding value, if your projects and programs are aligned to the business value and they're aligned to ROI, this conversation makes it much easier. Because you may have an executive come to you and say, hey, what value you're providing? You go, well, I just did X for HR, and we just saved the business and the company millions of dollars, or whatever the case may be. But that is a key component that a lot of PMO managers don't think about, and I say that's got to be an active part of your job. What value are you providing? That makes sense? Help? Makes
a lot of sense, Bill. Makes a lot of sense. And then one thing that I often get asked myself, and it ties in a lot to the value question, is the concept of reporting, right? And a lot of people out there are looking for that magic bullet or looking to create create that perfect PMO report, right? If someone came to you and said, hey, Bill, I want a perfect PMO report, or I'm creating a perfect PMO report, what would you tell them?
Yeah. Well, don't stop. Don't even try, right? Don't even try because there's no perfect report out there. And so I covered that in the executive section, right? Whatever report you provide to your executives, they're always going to want another one. They're always going to want a tweak. They're always going to want a color change, right? I talked earlier about putting the text red, yellow, and green because we have some executives that are colorblind. They may never tell you that. So a perfect report to them could be the text in the cells that actually help them see what's red, what's green, what's yellow. A lot of PMO managers don't think like that. I don't think create a perfect report, but I'm big into crawl, walk, run about getting some reports out there, testing what works, and then just continue to refine, continue to refine. The good thing is if they're asking for a PMO report, that means they care enough about the data, and so that's a good problem to have, but it's about don't even think that you're going to get a perfect report because you're just not. But it's about getting reports out there and refining along the way.
Right, so it's all about the iteration. It's all about, getting better at it. There's never going to be a perfect one because there's always going to be something different that people are going to be asking, right? So it's just like the expectations of a PMO, right? Even if you're doing a great job, people still want more. If you're not doing a great job, people still expect you to do what you need to do.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
I really like the whole mentoring, the PMO mentoring system, the buddy system, and I know you're a big fan. You're a big fan of it, right? But oftentimes when you set these things in place and people are told to do something, hey, Hussein, welcome to our PMO. This is going to be your buddy, and you need to do A, B, C, right?
Yeah.
Now, what can PMO leaders do so that both the mentoring system and the buddy system, don't become or feel as if they're a burden on the people who they're actually supposed to help?
Yeah.
And if you can maybe even share an example, Bill, and I know you've done this a lot, many times. Maybe an example that sort of makes it super evident of why and why this is so important and how this really helps someone.
Yeah, so I think a couple things there. I think it's really been one of my greatest successes, right? And so by getting this buddy system in place, it's been unbelievably successful for me, and it's because I see the impact of these relationships. So I had a scenario. I had a buddy system. I had multiple buddy systems, but one particular scenario of two individuals that were lined up. We used to have a PMO newsletter, and they actually wrote a story in the newsletter, an article in the newsletter about the buddy system and how it was working for them and how proud they were, and they had pictures of them being buddies, and it was a wonderful experience. And so if you think about if they're thinking it's a burden, or this is a lot of extra work I have to do, they're thinking about it all wrong. You've sold it the wrong way. And let me explain that. Basically, most PMs struggle with something. Most PMs do not want to run to their functional manager and say, hey, how do I create a Power BI report? How do I fill in a risking issue? But they will turn to their peer and go, hey, what do I put in that field of that risk and issue table? Or how do I do a project schedule? Or how do I do X? So they will more likely turn to their peer than they will come running to you. They don't want to come running to you. They don't want to look stupid. They don't want to look like you didn't hire the right person. So when you get a buddy system set up, it's fun, it's lighthearted, right? You kind of get, some pairings don't work. And so that's why I say you got to be open and honest to say what's working and not. But any one individual that thinks this is a burden is really not looking at it the right way. And so think about a person coming into a brand new PMO, they're ramping up, they need to know processes. Imagine how powerful that would be if you hook them with someone and you get them set up and go, hey, here's your buddy Mary, and Mary's going to actually help you ramp up into the new environment. Where I've also seen buddy systems work unbelievable is when you have remote people. So you've got people that work remotely and you pair them with someone in headquarters and you buddy them up. It's like, hey, I know I missed that meeting because it was at 3 o'clock in the morning my time, but can you tell me what happened? And they can have those offline conversations. So super proud of the buddy system. Really, really believe strongly in it and have seen multiple successes. The mentoring system's more formal though, and I think that I really believe in that as well. But that may be just because your company's got a big mentoring system, you need to just jump onto that. But the buddy system you control as a PMO manager.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you for that, Bill.
Yeah.
And Bill, one final question. PMOs are business units at the end of the day.
Yep.
Right? So there are a lot of important business-related aspects that that PMO leaders need to take care of, which you obviously pointed out. Those are super important, right? Like hiring, firing, cost management, performance management, performance appraisals. Making sure the overall team is motivated. What can a PMO leader do to stay ahead of the curve on all of these things and not get caught into firefighting mode? Oh my God, performance appraisals are tomorrow. Oh my God, I need to get all of these things done. What can PMO leaders do to stay ahead of the curve for them?
Totally. So that's my step 11, right? And so my step 11 is the HR side of things. And so there's multiple things you can do. So one of the things that you can do is you get that part of your cadence calendar, right? I talked about the cadence calendar. You can get HR type of items on there. You can say, performance reviews due in a month, or, you can get some of those bigger, broader, more important things on there. Another thing you can do is really know your people. And so I had a scenario where I was talking to a project manager, and he was working on 16 projects. So it was a 1-to-16 ratio. And he was barely staying alive. And it's like, really? I mean, you cannot possibly do a great job when you span that far. And so you got to know your people. You got to know what they can do, what they can't do, know their workloads, and really do balance, right? Do balance loading. Have those one-on-ones, have those conversations, and figure out where people are struggling, and then proactively work on that. Bring in vendors, help move that load so one person's not trying to tackle 16 different things. So that number 11, or that HR side of things, is a big component of your role. And it's something that if you're proactive about it, from cadence calendars, from HR items, and staying on top of the hiring and firing and your finances and your POs, you get out of that firefighting mode and you become more proactive.
Makes sense. That's amazing. Thank you so much, Bill. Once again, this was amazing. Great takeaways for all of us. We really appreciate you sharing your knowledge. Everyone listening out there, you have all the materials out here. On the screen, you see all the things that Bill's done, every way you can connect with him. He's got 3 amazing books out there: the PMO Lifecycle, Project Management Communication, and the Tactical Guide for Building a PMO. You can get them all on dowpublishingllc.com. Bill, it was a pleasure having you. Thanks once again.
All right. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.